Do you often feel like you are constantly giving more than you receive in your relationships? Do you feel drained, frustrated, even invisible in your relationships? You might be caught in an ego driven dynamic. And so in this video, you'll learn how to spot the signs of codependency and shift into a higher, a more authentic connection. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD and ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, which is the study of spirituality. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, which is both available on Amazon and Audible. So, what is an ego-driven relationship? Now, in order to get into an ego-driven relationship, we have to identify exactly what the ego is and what it does. So, the ego, to me, in my over 30 years of experiencing and studying spirituality, the ego to me is something that is very interesting and a very necessary part of our human experience here on this realm and this earth. And it is one of those things that has basically got a bad reputation. And that's simply because it is often mismanaged, often not even acknowledged in a productive way. And so the ego functions as a protective mechanism for, say, the physical body is a good example. Because when we think about the ego and its nature, it really goes inside and correlates to you identifying yourself as separate from another person, another thing, right? Think about our very beginning of existence as a human species. And, times are not as comfortable as they are now. There were many dangers and things that we had to be concerned about, protect ourselves from, even each other. And so when you think about the nature of the ego really, its job is to protect you from others. And it is a basically mechanism that creates an level of separation between you and everything else. Now, the reason why the ego tends to get us in trouble is because that idea of separation extends itself out into all aspects of our life and in every topic category. And so even in our relationships, we can come from a place of feeling fear, like things are going to hurt us, even though we are supposed to be our most vulnerable, our most complete and connected space. And so oftentimes when, history, trauma, things like that are experienced, they often will fuel the ego's desire to create a separation, the ego's desire or need or, mechanism or way of thinking is to basically enforce more of that separation, even when we are in a dynamic where things are not supposed to be separate, but things are supposed to be, connected and bonded and truly intimate. And so when we think about relationships, right, and we bring in that ego mindset, so to speak, then it creates a dynamic where the relationship is one where you find that you are connected emotionally, even spiritually, but there was a lot of drama and toxicity involved in that dynamic because the ego hasn't been managed appropriately. When we are on the spiritual journey, we are then equipped with the skills to manage the ego, recognize the ego when it shows up, and not let it bring a sense of separation into the relationship. You see? So you have to ask yourself when it comes to your relationships, are you, always focused on being right in your relationship? Are you always focused on being in control, right? Or validated, right? So those are some very basic, fundamental symptoms that you will experience when you are being driven by the ego. Okay. And you may experience that from your partner as well. You may notice if you or your partner often will prioritize personal needs while ignoring, right, the other person's feelings. You see, that is again a very problematic symptom of the ego, being led by the ego, where you only recognize yourself and you have no sense of consideration, understanding, or empathy toward the other. You see, and that is a dynamic where you are just simply not recognizing yourself as a unit. Okay. And, I feel like if you cannot recognize yourself as a unit, meaning you have a agreement, you have an understanding, then things can just kind of, honor of that agreement and understanding, you can just be at a place where you see, what, this is what we agreed upon. This is how I care about you and adore you and respect you. And therefore, this is what we are going to do. If you put those things aside and just only focus on you, then what's the point of having the agreement in the first place? Essentially, what's the point of having that kind of relationship, right? So if you're in a relationship, be focused and committed to being present in that relationship and whatever that agreement is, because you can always adjust the agreement if you feel like you have to. But oftentimes in these ego-driven relationships, that doesn't happen, because even to address the idea of changing an agreement means that you are considering the other person. When you're not in consideration of the other person, then why address the agreement? Who cares? You just want to focus on you and only you, right? That person only want to focus on them and only them. But yet, the couple is not willing to dissolve the relationship altogether. You see? So there's a lack of maturity that is happening in this dynamic that needs to be addressed, right? Another thing is when you recognize behaviors like manipulation, control, emotional detachment, or even the lack of empathy, that is also clear indicators that the ego is really, really a big element of this relationship, and you have to reflect on how these patterns may be creating distance, conflict, and of course, distrust in your relationships. So once you recognize that, you are able to grasp a deeper understanding of the ego-driven relationship, and then when you understand codependency, then, you look at how you might depend on the other for the validation, for the happiness, for the identity, right? For the love, failing to recognize that all of those things should be, right, provided for by self. And then when you experience that from another person, yes, it makes things even better. But always recognize that the things that you want and desire from another, you must be willing to provide it for yourself first. In fact, based on spiritual principles, when and only when you are able to provide it for yourself is only when you attract it from others. So when you are not able to provide it for yourself, what you're attracting from others is essentially false, right? It is fake. It is a product of the ego, and everything that we do in our relationships are essentially reflections of what we do for ourselves. What we experience from our relationships is essentially a reflection of what we do and feel about ourselves. So you have to acknowledge that if you are experiencing, right, the need for validation, right? If you're experiencing the need to feel love from this person, to feel wanted from this person, it is because you are lacking that from yourself, within yourself. And thus, that you are experiencing from them is ultimately a form of manipulation. They may be conscious of it, or they may be unconscious of it. But if you are not providing it for yourself, then you cannot identify even what it looks like, what it feels like. You see, it is just simply the pacification of your needs being met, right? It's just simply you putting tape on the hull of a boat as it's sinking. You're not really acknowledging the problem, which is ultimately your current inability to love yourself as you wish to be loved. So you have to pay attention to these signs, like signs like people pleasing. That's a big one, right? The fear of rejection is a huge one, and a reason why a lot of people get into these ego-driven, codependent relationships because they think that being alone is loneliness, but it's not. You see, being alone is in fact self-love. It is in fact beautiful because when you are comfortable being alone, that means you are comfortable loving yourself. You are complete. You are able to provide for yourself in ways that will allow you to feel fulfilled, feel happy, feel joy, feel supported. But if you only feel that when you're in a relationship with somebody else, it is a false belief system. It is a belief system where you are just simply thinking that somebody's presence is actually going to provide for you in a way that you haven't been able to provide for yourself. And so when you fear rejection, it is you looking to validate yourself. It is you looking to essentially be a people pleaser because now you are just simply doing things to make sure people like and accept you. And you're not being authentic to yourself, right? And you are basically demonstrating a very low self-esteem. You have to recognize that you are more than good enough. You are everything. You are the universe expressed and experienced as you. And so once you own that, then you recognize that the love, right, that you have for yourself radiates out throughout the universe. And everybody that exchanges with you will truly, truly love you. But it only starts with you. All right. So you realize when you are in a codependent relationship, you often allow and even, attract these ego-driven behaviors because you're giving away your power. You haven't even really acknowledged your power. You may be reading all the books, you may be attending all the workshops, seminars, and going to therapy, but you have to take ownership of your own power. Taking ownership of your own power means exactly what I said. It means displaying and giving yourself the love that you want from other people, that you want from another, giving it to yourself first. And that way you can recognize it truly from other people. So see how these imbalances like create emotional exhaustion and disconnection? Like they just pull you further and further away from recognizing where the source of the power is, where the source of love and this feeling that you desire is. It is within you. So the more you think that it is the other person, the more you think that you have to, appease, that you have to really focus on making sure they're here, even if they're not loving you in the way that is appropriate, then it is drawing you, pulling you further away from the true source of the power, which is within, you see? So how you recognize the signs of your life is about simply practicing awareness, self-awareness, right? Like asking yourself questions, right? Are your conversations filled with blame, defensiveness, or even misunderstandings? Like misunderstandings happen, right? They happen when we talk to people and we're learning each other's languages. We're learning how different things mean different things to each other. And we're finding a bridge between that. So initially, misunderstandings are going to happen, but eventually it should evolve to a place of recognizing and interpreting each other, right? And really knowing how to connect with one another, But blame, defensiveness are things that are really indicators that there is a problem of the ego really taking over that person's ability to see things from a place of love and compassion and even giving each other the benefit of the doubt, you know? You should be in a relationship giving each other the benefit of the doubt, meaning that you are recognizing that, okay, this is possibly likely a misunderstanding and that we can talk it over, we can communicate, we can really connect and find a deeper bond once this misunderstanding has been resolved or understood. You see? So notice if you're constantly giving but rarely receiving, you know, it's an indicator. Or if you are feeling emotionally depleted, like you're giving so much of yourself and their energy is such that they are receiving, taking it in, and not replenishing you, then it is a problem. The unit should be constantly feeding energy to itself, to one another. As a unit, you should be more energetic, more positive, right, than its parts. So then you are separate. Now, when you are separate and you are really focused on positivity, joy, fulfillment, alignment, and then you bring those two forces together, then it is basically nothing that can stop you as a unit. There's nothing that can really stop you as a person, right? Solo. But when you are a unit, the joy, the love, the bliss that is experienced should be something that is beyond amazing, right? And so you should understand that. You should notice those things when it happens and recognize that you should not feel depleted in your relationships. You should feel recharged, right? You should feel rejuvenated. You should feel hopeful, excited, passionate, you know? So you have to watch out for, power imbalances, Do you feel like the relationship is evolving around one person? Like, is it revolving around one person or is it evolving as a unit? You see, because if you are giving to the person and they are not giving back, then that means the relationship revolves around them. If you are giving, they are receiving gracefully with gratitude and thus giving as well back to you. So you are each giving to each other, essentially adding more and more to each other, bringing more value, more love to each other. Then you as a unit are evolving. And that's the way a relationship should actually work. You see? So reflect on whether there's a mutual respect. And if one of you, is dominant in the emotional space, be mindful about that. Sometimes it happens in relationships where one person is more emotional and the other person is just disconnected and just had no ability to communicate their emotions, you know. But still, there should be a sense of willingness to communicate, So you have to understand that communication is really the best demonstration of respect. When somebody doesn't communicate with you, then it's really, one, it can be a sign of their lack of maturity. That is something to really consider. Or they just don't want to communicate, right? They just they don't acknowledge you. They're not willing to, they're not willing to be vulnerable. They're not willing to acknowledge you in that way with respect of what you feel, what you're going through, what they feel, what they're going through. They may have a feeling and then don't want to communicate, but yet they want to act upon it and not care or consider how you may feel about it. You see, that's a problem, right? And that is a symptom of the ego. So breaking free from, these relationships is a matter of practicing self-love and boundaries. You see, so you have to begin with honoring your needs, honoring yourself. This isn't about putting yourself above them, but this is recognizing that the most important person in your universe is you, because you are the foundation and the creator of the universe that you're experiencing. And if the foundation isn't strong, then the universe or anything that's built upon that foundation is going to fall. All right. So you have to honor you and your needs. Start practicing self-care and reclaiming your self-worth, recognizing that you are just not enough. All right. You're more than enough. You're everything. Literally, you're everything. Everything that you're experiencing, everything that you have, everything that you want starts with you. You are everything, and everything else is an extension of you. When you understand that, it's just not a matter of saying, I'm enough. You are more than that. Okay? Once you understand that, that looks like you setting healthy boundaries. Okay? Especially in the beginning, because you have to separate who you once were between from who you are now, and of course, from who you are meant to be. And you do that by setting a boundary, meaning you're setting yourself up with rules of recognizing, of guidance toward letting go of that past self and setting yourself up to recognize where and how you must be moving forward in order to essentially create a space for that future self. You see? So when you set healthy boundaries, it really just increases the standard by which you are only going to accept and let go of the things that were beneath you before or are currently beneath you, right? Because those are things on a lower vibration. So they are beneath you. They are lower than you. You're on a higher vibration, you know? So even if it's uncomfortable at first, you set these boundaries. It's probably going to be uncomfortable, but you'll learn, as long as you stay with it and you're committed, that over time, you'll find yourself more comfortable with them. And then when you are so comfortable that it's easy, it's simple, it's basic, then that's the time when you should elevate and actually set higher boundaries, higher standards. Okay. Learn to express your feelings clearly. All right. Do it in a state where you are clear, where you are calm, and you are without guilt. So this means that you have to manage your emotions. Manage your emotions. Don't be somebody who is just off the cuff emotional. Acknowledge their emotions, but you have to put them to a place where they're not over exaggerated and just so intense that you cannot communicate effectively. Sometimes it's good to acknowledge the emotions, take a step back, and then just get calm and clear about what it is that you're feeling, why you're feeling it. And then that will help you and support you in communicating what your needs are. Okay. Especially when it comes to setting those boundaries. Another thing is, do not hesitate to reach out for support. Okay. Find friends who are in healthy, beautiful relationships, therapists, groups, things of that nature. Yes. Read books, watch videos, do all you can to ground yourself. Okay. And free yourself from codependent patterns. Ground yourself and really heal from the deeply rooted codependent patterns and allow yourself to actually be yourself, right? Love yourself, right? So how do you build authentic, healthy relationships? You must redefine what love looks like to you, because what love looked like to you previously is one that really doesn't align with who you really, truly, and really are. You see, that may be based on past experience or what you saw in relationships, right? Don't entertain that anymore. As you set those boundaries for yourself, you're also going to recognize that you have to evolve beyond what you have known love is. Focus on things like mutual respect, safety, and of course, emotional honesty. Being really connected with your emotions, being at a place where you are not doubting yourself or insecure, but really connected with you as a whole and complete being, and then allow that to express itself, right, with respect to the other person, and receive nothing less than somebody who is willing to do the same thing for themselves and communicate to you respectfully. There is nothing else that you should be allowing in your circle. So practice setting and honoring boundaries in all your relationships. Recognize levels of disrespect that you are just no longer tolerating anymore. Recognize ways of communicating and expressing yourself and themselves in a way that brings joy and happiness to you and fulfillment and understanding, more importantly, because really wanting to be right, whether it be in a conversation, whether it be in an idea, a theory, whether it be in a debate, that really has no true significance. It's really about understanding. That's where you get true knowledge, wisdom, and more importantly, we're talking about relationships, connection. When you understand another person's perspective. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It doesn't mean that that's how you would do things, but you just simply do your best to put yourself in their perspective, in their shoes, and you understand them. That in itself will create a bond between you and that person. So when we come to our relationships, we should be really entrenched in that desire to want to respect them, to want to understand where they're coming from. Okay. As long as it aligns with them communicating to you with respect, with love, with compassion, with empathy, them being authentic to themselves, then it should be something that you most certainly must welcome. Make sure both of you are growing together, not just surviving through connection, right? There are many couples who are together because they feel like they have to be, because maybe finances are tough, right? So they can't move out. One can't move out and get their own place. If they do, then it's going to mess up the household as far as the finances, even when together they're still struggling. So how are they going to survive separately? So they just stay with one another just because. And though they are staying with one another to survive, and they're not feeding one another as far as intellect and love and compassion, then there is more trauma, more drama, more toxicity that's building up, because now they're really codependent and they're extremely driven by their ego. So it just creates a true space of disharmony, discomfort, and just unease, right? Unhappiness. So you have to make sure that you're willing to grow together, even if you decide you're going to change the dynamic of that relationship. Sometimes people are married or they have children, they break up, and then, there's ugliness, but, you can transform the relationship and say, okay, we have to, we're going to communicate, and we have to communicate and have a relationship because of our children. Let's do this in a way that's loving. Let's grow this in a way that is connected, where we can be friends, we can be supportive of one another. And that will demonstrate itself through the growth and the expansion of our children and evolution of our children. Choose relationships where both people are heard, seen, and supported equally. Accept nothing else. Accept nothing else. You see, this is essentially how you evolve past that ego-driven codependency in your relationships and really create relationships that are desirable, that are enjoyable, and that are actually going to support you in creating the life that you want for yourself as an individual. You see, that's what this whole thing is about. Relationships are very important because they are reflections of who you are. So they show you what's going on within you, but they also help you to cultivate and curate a space where you evolve and you actually can be assisted and supported in obvious ways toward creating the life that you want. So let's let go of those relationships and let's create only relationships that are based on love, compassion, and understanding. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, get access to this free ebook, and so much more. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.